You guys, welcome back to another video, and I hope everyone's having an amazing day. And if you're new, welcome to the family, to the Dragonflies. I don't know, I'm still figuring out a name for my supporters. You know, like how they have like this and that game about this. You know, something. I want to find something spiritual and unique. But I'm back with Amazing Top 10. This is Top 10 Alive evil people you should fear. First of all, you should not fear nobody, first and foremost. And since it's almost like the Halloween season, we got September coming up, then maybe October. But once September hits, you already know it's Halloween season. But it's already Halloween season because every store you go in, Halloween candy, decorations, you already know how it goes. They already put this stuff out like 3 months earlier, as soon as Halloween over. During Halloween season, actually around like October, you already got the Christmas stuff. So let's watch Top 10 Alive Evil People You Should Fear.
Unfortunately, there are just some evil people who live in our world who set out to do some of the most horrific things, and that is what we are going to be talking about in this video. We're staying away from political leaders and instead are going from some of the most prolific serial killers to horrifying cult leaders and all of the terrible true crime things in between on today's most amazing Top 10 list. We are getting dark as we cover the Top 10 Alive Evil People You Should Fear. I am your host today, Olivia Kozlowski. This list is not for the faint of heart, so buckle up, folks, and let's get right into it. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Rainbow Maniac. The Rainbow Maniac is a serial killer in Brazil who was specifically targeting gay men. Over a span of 18 months from 2007 to 2008, this person took the lives of 13 separate people, execution style. Unfortunately, despite the time it's been, whoever perpetrated these horrific crimes is still unknown and uncaught. The location in Brazil where the crimes took place is known for being a more progressive area, but unfortunately at the time of the crimes, there were a few ultra-conservative groups who were extremely vocal about their intolerance towards people in the LGBTQIA+ community, so police believe that someone from one of these groups may be responsible, but of course this has not been fully substantiated. There have been suspects, and one person was even tried in relation to the crimes, but the jury found the person not guilty, so whoever the perpetrator is, they either got away with it or haven't been caught yet. In our number 9 spot today, we have Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez had a very difficult life growing up, and unfortunately, this led him to living a life committing crimes I can't even detail on this channel throughout South America during the 1970s. By the time the 1980s rolled around, he made a mistake during one of his awful crimes, and this led to his arrest. Once in police custody, he spilled all of the tea on basically his entire life and confessed to an insane amount of crimes. Police were a little skeptical of just how many crimes he said he committed, but Pedro was able to lead them to a mass grave where they recovered a total of 53 people's remains. Pedro, of course, went to jail, but get this, he was somehow released in 1994, which is absolutely insane. He was sent to some sort of mental institution for 3 years after, but he was also released from there. Okay, so aside from the crimes he committed, are you ready for the worst part? Well, in 2002, he was suspected of being the perpetrator of a new crime, but no one has been able to find him since 1998. Yep, Pedro just disappeared. In our number 8 spot today, we have Keith Raniere. This piece of work was the founder and leader of a cult called NXIVM, which you may have heard of for either its abundance of horrific crimes or because of its most high-profile member, Allison Mack. Between 1998 and 2018, this cult developed a following under the guise of some sort of personal development group. That truly is one of the worst parts of this cult, that some of the people who ended up being a part of it were really just setting out to better their own lives and somehow found themselves being manipulated by this evil person. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that went on within this cult and most of the things that Keith ended up being charged with are things I cannot say, but Google is free should you choose to look more up on your own, but I warn you, it's quite dark. The good news, however, is that in 2019, Keith ended up being convicted for his federal crimes and was subsequently sentenced to 120 years in prison. it really is just nice when the justice system works. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Golden State Killer. If you have any interest in true crime at all, you have most definitely heard of the Golden State Killer, as he was one of the most famous serial killers of all time and managed to elude police for 30 years. From 1973 to 1986, the GSK was responsible for taking the lives of 13 people, harming 50, and 120 different burglaries across California. Throughout the investigation process, he used different tactics to both taunt and threaten police and victims, which is just on a whole other level of messed up. If you don't know how this story ends, buckle up because it is wild. So you know how those family DNA test things have really taken off in the last few years? Like those 23andMe things where you send in your DNA and then they send you back your genealogy? Well, basically, these services helped identify who the real GSK was. In 2018, when Detective Paul Holes, shout out to MFM, if you know, you know, and FBI lawyer Steve Kramer uploaded the GSK DNA profile, which they were able to obtain from the crime scenes, to the website GED Match. They were able to find 10 to 20 people who had the same great-great-great-grandparents as the match. From there, a genealogist made a large family tree, and from there, they were able to single out 2 main suspects. After covertly collecting DNA samples from one of the suspects and comparing them to the crime scene DNA, they were finally able to arrest Joseph James DeAngelo, who is the Golden State Killer. After decades of waiting, the victims of his crimes were finally able to see justice served, as he was sentenced to 12 life sentences plus 8 years. He was spared the death penalty because he admitted to numerous crimes he had perpetrated, some of which he wasn't even being charged for. He is now 75 years old and will most definitely spend the rest of his life in prison. In our number 6 spot today, we have Tex Watson. Tex Watson was one of the central members of the Manson family, which was led by Charles Manson, and was a willing participant for the horrible Tate and LaBianca crimes that took place on August 9th and 10th, 1969. If you don't know about them, you can look them up, but just a warning that the events that took place on those nights were horrible, gruesome, and insanely unnecessary. In October of 1969, Tex knew his arrest was coming, so he fled to his home state of Texas, but was later arrested and extradited back to California. Once he was in California, he refused to talk or eat and ended up losing 55 pounds, which got him sent to get tested to see if he was fit to stand trial. He was. In 1971, he was convicted on 7 counts of first-degree unalive and 1 count of conspiracy to commit unalive. He originally received a death sentence, but it ended up being commuted to life in prison. But get this, you guys. He was able to release a book while in prison, and he got married, and through conjugal visits was able to have 4 children. Thankfully, in 1996, they banned those kinds of visits for people serving life in prison, and in 2003, he got divorced because his wife had met someone else. Like, him taking the lives of 7 people wasn't enough. She just needed to find the right one. I cannot make this stuff up. He also apparently is now a devout Christian, which seems like it's a little late for that now, but I guess I'm just editorializing at this point. In our number 5 spot today, we have the vending machine killer. Okay, this is something I didn't know before, but apparently Japan has a ton of vending machines. Like, so many, there's approximately 1 vending machine for every 23 people. That's a lot of vending machines. You might be sitting there wondering why I'm talking about vending machines on a list of evil people, but I promise it's relevant. So, in 1985 in Hiroshima, there were 12 people who passed away and 35 who were seriously injured from being poisoned with a chemical herbicide. When this string of poisonings were investigated, authorities realized that they had one thing in common, and that was the fact that they had all had the same drink shortly before falling ill. So, around the time of this whole thing, there was a company that had launched a marketing campaign where they gave you a free drink with every purchase made from a vending machine. When people didn't want their free drink, they would leave it on top of the vending machine for the next person who came along, which is super nice and thoughtful and kind, and of course that means that some horrible person out there had to ruin it for everyone. So as it turns out, someone was taking these drinks, lacing them with poison, and then leaving them on the top of vending machines for some random stranger to come around, drink it, and then be sick or pass away. It is
That's
almost
weird. Wouldn't you just
impossible
throw it in
for
the
authorities
trash
to be
and
able to
can't
track
pick
down
your own
whoever was
drink?
doing this, because you have to narrow down where the person picked up the drink, and in 1985 there weren't as many CCTV cameras as there are now. So unfortunately, whoever was responsible for this mass poisoning of strangers is still out there somewhere. In our number 4 spot today, we have Elizabeth Wettlaufer. We are bringing it closer to home with an evil person who's from Ontario, Canada, which, if you don't know, is where I am right now. Elizabeth is a former registered nurse and serial killer who is responsible for taking the lives of 8 people and attempting to take the lives of another 6 senior citizens who were under her care. With a total of 14 victims that either passed away or were harmed by her actions, she is now one of the worst serial killers Canada has ever seen. And not to mention how she was doing these things to vulnerable people who she was supposed to have devoted her life to taking care of. Her first victim who passed away was James Silcox, who was 84 in 2007 and was a World War II veteran. She committed her crimes by injecting insulin into her patients. In September of 2016, Liz ended up entering herself into a drug rehabilitation program at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which is located here in Toronto. It was here that she ended up confessing to her horrific crimes. Of course, the staff at the hospital notified the proper authorities, and she was subsequently arrested, and she gave police a 2-hour confession. She admitted to knowing what she did was wrong, but she said she just had urges she couldn't control. She stated that God or the devil or whatever wanted me to do it. She also apparently had confessed to the crimes to multiple people before, but no one believed her, which is absolutely insane to me. Why would anyone ever make that up or joke about that? Either way, she ended up being sentenced to life in prison, and she will eventually be eligible for parole. In our number 3 spot today, we have Daniel Perez. Daniel Perez might be better known by his alias Lou Castro, but he truthfully is best not being known at all because he sucks. Daniel led a cult that was located on a 20-acre property in a rural area just north of Wichita. He convinced his followers that he had magical powers, and he told them all that he was a centuries-old angel who needed to commit some horrific crimes in order to stay alive. These crimes would have certainly been more than enough to throw him on this list, but he of course couldn't just stop at committing one type of crime. He had to make sure he really stole the show on being the worst. Basically, he had the clever idea to use his followers' life insurance policies to live a lavish lifestyle. Like as if no one would think that's weird or suspicious. While some of these life insurance policies were collected through regular means, of course that kind of greed only leads to evil things, which of course means that he ended up taking one of his followers' lives so he could collect the cash. It is thought that he also contributed to the deaths of some of the other people's life insurance policies he cashed in on, but unfortunately there was never any evidence that would be able to substantiate that claim. Despite this, however, on April 21st, 2010, authorities were able to arrest Daniel, and he was charged with 28 felonies. In February of 2015, he was convicted on all counts and received a sentence of 80 years in jail. In our number 2 spot today, we have David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, or the son of Sam, is an American serial killer who terrorized New York from July of 1976 to July of 1977. He took the lives of 6 people and wounded 7 others, all while eluding the biggest manhunt in New York City history. He was one of those arrogant ones who leaves the little notes for police promising to do it again. Well, his arrogant self was caught for his crimes, and he was arrested on August 10, 1977, and was indicted for his crimes. He confessed to all of them and claimed that he was just obeying the orders of a demon that had manifested itself in the form of a dog that belonged to his neighbor. Yeah, David. Okay. He was found mentally competent to stand trial, and he pleaded guilty to his crimes, which left him sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. He later admitted to making up the dog story, which, duh, but he did say that instead he was a member of a violent satanic cult and his crimes were committed as a part of that. These claims were investigated, but no one has been able to confirm or deny them. In our number once
That
what's
was a
the name? We
lie.
have Charles Cullen. This guy used to be a nurse who took the lives of his patients throughout his career, and he may be one of the worst serial killers ever recorded. He confessed to taking the lives of 40 people, but through subsequent interviews, it became apparent that the number was way higher than 40. He just couldn't remember the names of them all, but he of course could remember the details of his crimes against them. That is truly a new level of messed up. His crimes started in 1998 and spanned over a decade into 2003. In October of 2003, when a patient at a hospital passed away from low blood sugar, the authorities were called. This person was Charles' final victim, and authorities began looking into him and investigating his past employment history. On December 12, 2003, authorities were arresting him and charging him with only one count of his crimes, but he ended up admitting to 40. He ended up pleading guilty to his crimes and arranged a plea deal where authorities would not seek the death penalty if he cooperated. During one of his court proceedings, he continuously asked the judge to step down and apparently repeatedly chanted, "Your Honor, you need to step down," for 25 minutes, even after he was restrained and gagged for his outbursts. It is thought that his victims might be up in the 400 range, which is truly unbelievable. Charles was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences and will be eligible for parole in 2403, but something's telling me that he might not get it.
Wowzers. Wowzer pedowzers. See, looking at these faces, it's so dark, so sinister, so, I don't give a fuck a look, you know? Definitely, the devil's working. And I definitely stay away from these places. Thank God I don't live near here. By them. Or they don't live around me. That is so disgusting. Just to look at it, just to think. All these people. So tell me guys what you think about this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Drop any suggestions below. Yeah, have the most awesome day, positive day, stay grateful, stay blessed, and stay safe out in these streets. And until next time, peace, dragonflies.